Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Plus Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ plus communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we're covering on this week's episode. The intersection of LGBTQ plus identity and the military. We know it's a tricky space, so what is the latest for our LGBTQ plus siblings serving in the armed forces? From the military to the classroom, what are the latest LGBTQ plus stories you need to know in the educational sector? It is, of course, the holiday season. What holiday LGBTQ plus stories do you need to know about? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer all of those questions and so many more, reporter for HuffPost covering LGBTQ plus rights, Levi Kalish. Levi, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is great to have you. Founder and editor-in-chief of Uncloseted Media, an investigative media company providing you with objective, nonpartisan, rigorous, and original journalism that examines America's anti-LGBTQ plus landscape and elevates everyday American heroes. Spencer Macnaughton, I did it in one breath. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be back.
And joining us for the first time, senior national reporter for The Advocate, covering the intersection of public policy and politics with LGBTQ plus lives, including the White House, Congress, the Supreme Court, federal agencies, and anyone he can talk to about these important stories. Christopher Wiggins, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's so exciting to be here.
Well, our LGBTQ plus reporters roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. Let's start out this week talking about a ton of military-related stories. That continues to be an extraordinarily fraught space for LGBTQ plus Americans. Levi, you wrote about the Trump administration's violating a 32-year-old policy. That can't be good. What is going on there?
Well, the Trump administration has violated a lot of policies lately, but I wrote this story about trans service members who are being denied their retirement benefits after being approved for early retirement. And this only really applies to a handful of people. But I spoke with a decorated Air Forceman named Logan Ireland, who, along with a dozen other trans service members, had applied for and was approved for early retirement. And his situation is pretty rare because the vast majority of folks are just being purged full stop after Trump's ban on trans service members went into effect earlier this year. But since he had served 15 years in the Air Force and included deployments in combat zones, he was eligible for something called Temporary Early Retirement Authority, or TERA, which allows veterans to get access to pensions, and top-tier healthcare benefits. But 2 months after he was approved for these benefits, the Air Force just revoked them without any kind of explanation. So Logan and the other plaintiffs sued, and lawyers for the plaintiffs say that this kind of revocation has never really happened before and violates a 1993 policy authorized by Congress that basically says once you've been given your retirement benefits, like they're pretty much set in stone, except for these extraordinary circumstances like fraud or some kind of clerical error, or if someone is being incarcerated or under investigation. And none of those circumstances apply here. And so one of the lawyers I spoke to, Shannon Minter, at the National Center for LGBTQ Rights, was concerned that if the Trump administration can get away with this, can, treat people who've served the military in extraordinary ways, there's really no telling what more he could do to more vulnerable trans populations. So this is definitely concerning.
And not to call out the obvious, Levi, but this can't be to save money, because there's no way this saves more than a few $1,000.
No, yeah. I mean, well, so some of these veterans are entitled to, millions of dollars in benefits, but for putting their lives on the line for 15 to 18 years. But many of the advocates I spoke to say that this is just cruelty, like to allow someone to get that early retirement and then just to take it away. This means that so many people who were planning what the rest of their lives would look like outside of the service now are in this horrible limbo where they really don't know what what's going to come in just a few months' time.
Yeah. We love putting names to these stories, actual people's names. Spencer, tell everyone about Elena Kupek.
Yeah, Elena Kupek is she's a really good friend of mine, and she served as a U.S. Navy intelligence officer, and specifically in a Navy strike fighter squadron in, I believe, the 90s and perhaps the early 2000s. She's a trans-military vet, and I did some work with her through her nonprofit Grace. But she's just an amazing person. I mean, we've become great friends, and she's a huge advocate for the queer and trans community. She and her wife, Kathy, we hang out all the time. And, you know, Elena's really become an advocate where she's had to go on CNN, you know, the day after officially Trump's trans military ban went into effect, and, you know, essentially go crossfire with 5 other cisgender people who I believe none of them actually served in the military. There wasn't one other trans person on that panel. And, you know, she had to sit through 10 minutes of what I describe as a massive false equivalency, where it's either do they deserve or not? Is it fair or not? And, you know, unlike other possible, you know, debates we could have about LGBTQ issues, there is no other explanation for banning trans people from the military other than discrimination, right? So I'm really respect her for going into these spaces where a lot of the time she has to fight against a false equivalency and just like misinformation about whether or not there is a fairness issue or, you know, the ability to be equipped to actually serve. And, you know, she's now an executive advisor, and she represents what many are calling a brain drain. She's leaving America. She and her wife are planning to leave the United States. They actually stayed at my mom's house in Toronto a few weeks ago, and we're looking at new places to live in Canada, and they're also exploring Europe. But I think one of the things we don't talk about enough is the drain of LGBTQ people at large, and also the brain drain of people in high-level positions that this country is just losing, and in turn will become less competitive because of it.
Well, it's not just trans Americans facing difficulties with the armed forces. Christopher, what the heck is going on with the military recruitment of those living with HIV? Which I have to tell you, when I read this story, it was a nice reminder for me of, oh, I actually don't know all the things going on, because I definitely did not know about this one.
I also had thought that it was completely legal for everyone to serve. I mean, obviously, in this administration, transgender people can't. But, you know, I didn't know that there was still a restriction on those living with HIV and serving in the military, which probably says a lot about how important it is that people become aware of what's going on here. This case is about whether the US military can keep a blanket ban on people with HIV from enlisting. And even if modern medicine makes that completely indefensible. There's the saying, U equals U, undetectable equals untransmissible. That is for anyone living with HIV who has such a low viral load or non-detectable viral load, they cannot transmit HIV to anyone. PrEP also makes it so that, you know, we've just come very far on the HIV issue. So Lambda Legal is asking a federal appeals court in Virginia to uphold a lower court ruling that happened last year that struck the policy down. The case is Wiggins versus Hegseth, and it challenges the Defense Department's rules that automatically bar anyone with HIV from joining the armed forces, regardless of their health, which doesn't make much sense at the get-go. But a district judge ruled last year that the ban violated the Constitution and federal law, calling it irrational and rooted in stigma and not in science, which of course was really encouraging at the time. But of course, that's now being challenged. And the key point is that while the ruling is in effect, the military was already processing enlistments from people living with HIV. And that was done without any impact on readiness, any impact on safety, and directly undercuts the Pentagon's argument. So the government appealed, and while the appeals court considers that case, it's now temporarily reinstated the ban, which is of course frustrating on many levels. They've done this in this case, they've done it in some of the trans-military cases too. And of course that doesn't decide the outcome, but it does pause the progress. And so advocates are saying that the enlistment ban is basically the last remaining barrier for people living with HIV who want to serve. And you know, the court I have learned not to read the tea leaves, so I make no predictions on when or what the court will decide, but the ruling should come in a few months, and it'll determine whether the door finally stays open or whether, with so many things in the year 2025 going into 2026, is something that's closed again.
It's like the only thing that I know because I'm just not in any orbits around the military and I don't write a lot of stories that in any way intersect with the military. But what little I know is that there's a shortage of people who want to serve. And so this idea that readiness is not the determining factor is just this narrative thread that connects all of these stories. I think, as Spencer said, like, we're both siding something that doesn't have two sides.
There is no problem here, right? These are all solutions looking for a problem where there not only is no problem, but there's evidence that what is being deemed problematic is actually the benefit and like doing really well and serving better than some of the counterparts on the more acceptable side of things. So, it's just blatant hypocrisy in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, from one area of hypocrisy to the other, we turn to my chosen field, the field of education, because it, of course, continues to be pretty darn complicated in that area of society for our LGBTQ plus siblings. So let's talk a little bit about that educational environment. Spencer, let's actually start by talking about our teachers. We talk a lot about students, and necessarily so. But about a week after you were last on the podcast in September, you didn't even mention that this was coming up for you, so we're going to move quickly past that slight. You published an incredible chat with 6 LGBTQ plus and allied teachers. What did you learn through those conversations? It was also a nice reminder to our newsroom that we do have to do more video content, which we were kind of annoyed about.
We always have that trouble. It's like video, right? No, what I learned is that, teachers who are trying to do their job of teaching about different groups, different marginalized groups, different life experiences, can't do it, especially in various states, particularly red states, where there are, a litany of anti-LGBTQ bills, many focused on education, many focused on queer kids. And the other thing I took away is that they're getting in trouble. And I actually just want to fast forward to an interview that I did last week where Fox News' Outkick, a sports commentary website, published 18 stories on one allegedly trans athlete in rural Michigan who might be playing on a volleyball team there. And a bunch of MAGA parents got so riled up by these articles that one of them filed a complaint with the Department of Education and went on Fox News and started name dropping an athletic director, this guy Chet, who works at the school. I interviewed Chet on Thursday, who's an ally. We published a 1-minute clip. And over the weekend, the clip blew up and Chet has been put on administrative leave and his job is now being threatened. And Michigan state representatives are posting to their Twitter that they think he should be fired. And the clip, you can go watch it on Uncloseted Media's Instagram, simply has Chet saying that he has this kid's back because he couldn't imagine what it's like to be in the middle of a media firestorm around their gender identity. And I mean, look, we are nonpartisan, but I think objectively, you can say that that type of reaction to somebody who's trying to be an ally is disgraceful. And I hope if anyone's listening, I really hope that they can think about that while they decide whether or not Chet should keep his job for showing allyship.
Well, let's turn, though. We're going to stay in that university world. Christopher, I am a tenured professor of education for a few more months. I have failed a chunk of students in my career. Not a ton, by the way. Just for the record, I actually have not failed that many students over the past 13 years. And I have never been suspended for failing a student. I read a story of yours. What do I actually need to do to get suspended?
Well, I guess what you need to do is grade the way that you normally would. I don't know. This story is quite something. And so here's what happened. It all started with what should have been the least controversial thing ever, a grading of a rubric. At the University of Oklahoma, a student in a psychology class, so a science, turned in a paper that didn't use research, didn't respond to the prompt, and instead described transgender people as quote unquote demonic and gender roles as biblically ordained. And then it didn't even cite the Bible. Like at least it could have cited something, but did none of that. So again, this is a science class. Unsurprisingly, the instructor, one of the TAs, gave the paper 0, not for religion, but for failing the assignment. And like the rubric was put out. A second instructor reviewed the paper independently and agreed, wrong class, wrong approach, wrong grade expectations. So F is an F is an F. And that's when the internet arrived. Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, they posted screenshots. Conservative media jumped in, swirled it up into the froth that they do, and suddenly the bad paper becomes a statewide culture war emergency where the governor posted online about the school's board of regents, and ultimately the graduate instructor was put on administrative leave while the university investigates whether there's a religious discrimination complaint or whether that is an upheld concern, right? Then, of course, because the story needs a sequel, a second instructor was also suspended. Why? Because the university says that instructor excused some students from class to attend a protest supporting the first instructor, but didn't extend the same courtesy to the students who disagreed. In other words, OU is now saying that who gets a hall pass in a free speech dispute. And the university says no one will suffer financial or academic harm during these reviews. But I mean, the message is clear, right? If you're an instructor, I mean, you tell me, Ken, if you're a professor and you're grading according to what you know to be your grading standards, and you get accused of religious discrimination because someone puts a paper like this before you, what would you do?
I would remind the students that you can indeed cite the Bible using APA format. So there's just no excuse for that to not be in their bibliography. So that right there for my graduate students. Yeah. It's these stories just remind me, like, there's a part of me that's like, what am I doing in higher education if this is what we're encountering? I mean, there are words. One of the reasons that I'm not going to be in higher ed anymore in just a few is because I teach diversity in higher education. It's literally my academic field. And there are words I'm not allowed to say anymore, which would make it impossible for me to teach diversity in higher education. And this story just knocked me down.
Yeah. And the thing about this story that really gets me is the Riley Gaines of it all, right?
Always.
Like this is they're going to turn the student who had this complaint. Her mom also like turns out to be like a lawyer for Moms for Liberty, or has some kinds of Moms for Liberty connection. So I mean, she has all the ingredients, right, to be made into one of those right-wing celebrities that they love to all turn into Mar-a-Lago face. But seriously, like she is someone who I do feel is being elevated into this kind of status of aggrieved by the left, the woke, the trans of it all is attacking her ability to, I don't know, write mediocre papers, I guess. But that's it does seem like she's getting a lot of attention for doing what Riley Gaines did, which was place fifth against a transgender person.
And we have to add lucrative attention.
Very lucrative, yes.
They get paid for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Levi, although not specifically an LGBTQ plus story, we are nothing but intersectional here at This News Is So Gay. And you talk about a piece that knocked me down, a piece about teachers taking on a new duty in the Trump era, watching out for ICE. And as I was reading this piece, because one of the things we love talking about on this podcast, certainly everyone should go check it out because that's what the piece is about. But I want to hear what it was like putting a piece like that together, because that's got to take something out of you.
Yeah, I mean, the whole news cycle takes something out of me every day. But I think it was just a story that I couldn't really ignore. I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I live down the street from a Home Depot that has been raided dozens of times, and you can't even just to merge onto the freeway, I can't do that without seeing every day how many people are outside from 6 to 12, patrolling, making sure that the day laborers there and other folks who utilize the Home Depot because of the color of their skin or the language that they're speaking are being targeted. Some of my friends are involved in that kind of patrolling as well. And so I've just been kind of steeped in that community since the summer. And I think for a long time, the question was, okay, summer schools, school's not in session. A lot of families are staying at home, but what's going to happen once school starts up again in late August, early September. And so, I've been talking to a bunch of these groups. A lot of them are, informal networks of organizers, just everyday people who are involved in like the tenants union, for example, or the teachers union in Los Angeles. And it kind of was a natural outgrowth. I was kind of curious about how folks were thinking about back to school, and how to keep families safe. And so I started talking with, advocates at the teachers union and the tenants union. And they kind of just discussed how, they're going to expand their patrol areas from, there's a school near Home Depot and like MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, and how they're going to, connect with teachers about like making sure that students have a place to, have someone with them, walking with them from the bus to school, making sure that, that whole way there's someone watching out. And so my colleague, who I wrote the story with, Jessica Schulberg, she and I shadowed a few patrols and talked with teachers about their experiences preparing for ICE. And one teacher in particular that I spoke to, something that they said really stuck out to me, because I talked with this teacher last year about, prior to the election, how are they thinking about education and protecting trans students and also protecting immigrant students. And they've been preparing for over a year for this. And so one thing that this teacher said was that basically now, if ICE is present on their campus without a warrant, the school will go into full lockdown mode, which is, the same kind of response that they would have to an active shooter, or to a fire or a major earthquake. And, we all know here in LA, we've been through a lot this year between the fires and the ICE raids. And so, it's devastating to me that teachers have to take on this kind of insane role of being, both educator, also protecting their students from all of this violence, and also making sure that families are educated, helping families come together to go to Know Your Rights campaigns, or helping families that have, the ability to participate in patrols and participate in other drop-offs do so. And it really just highlighted to me like how much extra labor these community members are taking on, in the absence of, in the face of all of this state violence. And so, I think it's both heartening to see all of these communities coming together, and it's also just really laying bare like the kind of desperate situation that we're in Los Angeles. But just to plug, there's ways for community members to get involved in whatever city they're in. If ICE hasn't come to your community, I'm sure there's groups, whether it's a tenants group, a teachers union, or whatever, that there's a way to get involved and learn how to document ICE in a safe way.
I have the remarkable privilege in putting together this podcast of reading so many pieces from so many journalists. And I love being reminded when I read a particular piece, yep, there's no way I have the skill set to write that one. And that was one of those pieces of that's way beyond my capacity. So everyone must go check out that piece. Well, 'tis the season for some holiday stories. We have some quick holiday stories for you. They're somewhat jolly. We'll see. Christopher, I am obsessed with this story. I have forwarded it to so many different folks. There was a Christmas party to which I'm making an assumption, but I don't think any of us on this week's roundtable got the invite. Tell us about the hot ticket that was George Santos's Christmas party.
Yeah, so I get invited to a lot of events, since I'm here in DC. And this is not one that I had the pleasure, or, well, I don't think it would be the pleasure of having an invite to. So if you've ever wondered what happens when Washington runs out of irony, this is the party that answered the question. Because fresh off of his prison sentence commuted by Donald Trump, former Congressman George Santos threw an exclusive Christmas party in DC because apparently the halfway house is now a holiday venue. He called it the Santos Clause, which feels accurate since reality was optional. The guest list read like a greatest hits album of American notoriety. There was Anna Delvey, the Netflix famous fraudster who had all of New York City believing that she was an heiress, when in fact she's just a regular German-born woman who was pulling the wool over people's eyes. Then there was, get this, Martin Shkreli, the once known as the most hated man in America, because he was that pharmaceutical executive who like quadrupled the price of really, really important life-saving medication. So he was there. newly branded Trump enemy Marjorie Taylor Greene was there. Scott Pressler was, Meghan McCain, Carrie Lake. I mean, you name them, they were there. But what was really funny about this was that who also was there was Lauren Boebert. She, of course, showed up at the door. There's video of this. TMZ had it. She showed up at the door, and the bouncer, who is a former aide of Santos's, he, stands there and like says that she can come in, but her entourage of people that she had with her, because she's a very important congresswoman, they could not come in. And so there was this whole kerfuffle at the door about that. And ultimately she got in, but some of her aides did not. The most hilarious part of this is that, Santos had said in advance of this event that if he doesn't see you there, then you didn't work hard enough. So who knows what that means? But ultimately, Santos pleaded guilty to wire fraud and identity theft. He served only about three months of a 7-year sentence, and he walked straight back into the Washington nightlife like it was nothing. And so the takeaway isn't subtle. In modern politics, disgrace isn't a disqualifier, it's a networking tool. And at this point, the only thing missing was that the bling ring group from, famously stealing things in LA were like the coat check handlers. I mean, the story writes itself.
I love that story. I've had so much fun with that over the past week. Well, Levi, for so many of us, Pride is a prime holiday, and many of us celebrate it the whole year round with pride flags, either at our house or not either, but in addition to our workspace. But it sounds like there is one less pride flag out there. What went down at the FBI?
Well, I never thought I would be writing a story about someone displaying a pride flag at the FBI, but here we are. Last month, a longtime FBI employee sued the agency because he alleges that he was fired unlawfully because he displayed a pride flag at his workstation in the Los Angeles field office. The employee, his name is David Maltinsky. He was on the cusp of finishing his training to become a special agent when he received a dismissal from FBI Director Kash Patel for the inappropriate display of political signage at his workspace. Since 2021, the FBI has allowed employees to hang pride flags, and this employee in particular was given several pride flags for recognition of his work to improve the FBI's DEI policies. He was trying to help make the FBI more inclusive to LGBTQ people. And his firing is part of a pattern of firings from Patel. And the lawsuit notes that the FBI employees can still display other kinds of flags, like the Gadsden flag and the Punisher flag, both of which we know have been associated with far-right movements. So it's not surprising, but it is definitely a new development in the FBI's purging of people that the administration does not like. So that's where we're at.
What was the phrase you taught me before we went on the air, Christopher? That I can no longer be surprised, but I will always be shocked. What's my new phrase?
Yes, that you shouldn't be surprised, but always shocked.
I'll take it. I'm going to use that all the time. And Spencer, for so many folks, the holidays, there's a deep connection between holidays and faith. And there's an incredible new piece in Uncloseted about people leaving Christianity due to anti-LGBTQ plus animus. Why now, Spencer? Which is right there in the headline. Why now?
Why now? Yeah, no, this was a great piece written by Jake Angelo, and we did with our partners at Gay Times. And what I found striking, the stat that was included in the piece was that in 2024, 47% of adults deconstructed and left their faith. Up from 29% in 2016. So that's a huge jump, 47% leaving compared to 29%. And roughly 60% of people under 30 say they left their religion for LGBTQ animus, right? So I think the takeaway now is that we're now in a space in America where I think it's, according to Gallup, 1 in 5 adult Gen Z people identify as LGBTQ. So now we're in the world of the internet and TikTok. So no matter how small your town is, and no matter how insulated you are from what a lot of these religious people call the outside world, everyone now knows a queer person, right? And we know from research that the way to build acceptance is to understand and to meet somebody who is LGBTQ identifying. Most kids now have a gay or trans person in one of their classes. And I think that is creating a next generation of people, Gen Z, Z adults and Gen Alpha that's coming up right behind them who've just had enough and said, I'm not doing Christianity with an appetizer of hate anymore. That's not going to work for me. And it is a deal breaker. And I think, all religions, and particularly Christianity is what we focused on, the denominations that are still say that homosexuality is sinful or unnatural or disordered, or still don't want to admit that trans people do exist. There are many trans people in this country, need to take note or they will become obsolete. And I think, to ask, just be a little less hateful, reinterpret how you see some scripture just to be more inclusive. It shouldn't be the end of the world, but it still is. And for the most part, for just older people who are still in these leadership positions who won't budge on that issue and still want to weaponize their power, their leadership by, creating and villainizing the most marginalized people in our society. So I think now we're just in a place where we're too smart and people don't want to be religious when it comes with, a mouthful of hate.
No hateful appetizers. That is the lesson that I have learned there. Well, everyone, you are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, Levi Kalish from HuffPost, Spencer Macnaughton from Uncloseted Media, and Christopher Wiggins from The Advocate. And by the by, if you are not subscribed to This News is So Gay, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to This News is So Gay right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it's time, folks, for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they have seen out there in the world. So let's set off a glitter bomb. Levi, let's start with you. Give us a story of queer joy that you saw out there that you want folks to know about.
I don't know if this constitutes queer joy, but some positive legal news I learned was that a federal judge in Georgia ordered that Georgia's prison system has to keep providing gender-affirming care for incarcerated trans people. And I've been trying to do some work around trans folks' experiences in being incarcerated and also in immigration detention. So this was a positive development. It's a bleak situation for trans folks in prison. Most people are not getting access to any kind of gender affirming care ever. So the fact that some folks will hopefully be able to, at least on paper, is a win.
We will take access to healthcare as being queer joy these days. So absolutely. Christopher, how about a story of queer joy from you?
So, this one is probably the antidote to Spencer's last story, because it's a story of queer joy that I covered recently, and that is of a transgender pastor in New York who came out to her congregation as trans during Sunday service. She did it her name is Philippa Fanev. She did it with the care of somebody who's been a pastor for a long time. She used slides to walk people through what changes and what stays the same. And that was such a pastoral PowerPoint. It really touched me. I'm not religious myself, but I discovered the video and actually posted to my Facebook page, hey, I'm gonna reach out to her, but I just needed you all to see this, because it just lit up my being. It was just so wonderful the way she, with compassion and with just intelligence, just walked people through her coming out. And she said, imagine if a doctor could provide you with medication that would make you feel the joy that God has found possible for you to enjoy. Would you not take it? And she literally walked her congregation through it, and it was remarkable. When we spoke, she told me that she feels surrounded by loving kindness. She has had joy for the first time in a long time. Her 12-year-old daughter is her biggest fan and biggest supporter. People in the congregation supported her. The church leadership supported her. It was really, a story that was warming and also kind of juxtaposed against what we all kind of have in our minds with the rejection of churches or by churches of LGBTQ people, how it doesn't have to be that way, right? And so that to me was really a story that's going to stick with me for a while because of just the innocence and the joy that came from it by someone just opening themselves up and saying, hey, this is who I am, and take me or leave me.
Amazing. You have me convinced. I'm going to go check that out. Spencer Macnaughton, give us a story of queer joy.
I will do that, and I'll shamelessly plug Uncloseted. So I would like to say, anyone watching, please stop what you're doing. Go to unclosetedmedia.com and click on the story that's riding our homepage, which is titled Meet Queen Susie, the Bible Belt's Biggest Ally. Queen Susie, pronouns she and queen, is 47 and lives with her parents. She hates labels. Some have labeled her as neurodivergent, but she just describes herself as thinking outside of the box. And she was born and raised in the Bible Belt to a very evangelical family who told her that, homosexuality was sinful, disordered, unnatural, etc. And actually, my boyfriend, Sean, grew up with her, and he came out to her at 20. And she was the only one in the entire family who said, absolutely not. I'm not rejecting you. I'm here for you till the day I die. And that's how I see Christianity. She says she likes Christianity when it's chill and not filled with strife. And I just think Queen Susie, who I assisted, but she wrote the story herself. We need to hear perspectives like hers more because they're different. And I think we don't do enough of a good job at putting those perspectives like Susie's in the media. And it's also just an absolutely beautiful story of love and friendship and allyship, where she just said, I don't care what the rest of my community, my church, my small town says, I'm sticking by you. And Sean's been an ally for her too. He built up her resume, helped her get a job at Dunkin' Donuts, So yeah, just really proud of Susie for writing that. And I think that's what we need this holiday season. More messages like Queen Susie's.
And has Queen Susie got to stay at your mom's place in Canada?
No, but she'll FaceTime my mom like maybe 15 times in a row until my mom finally picks up, which she always does.
Amazing. Amazing. And finally, because apparently I cannot leave George Santos's Christmas party behind, I need to ask my roundtable for this week's quick queer culture question. What dish would you bring to George Santos's Christmas party? Spencer, we'll start with you. What side dish are you bringing to the party?
I'm going to bring maybe like a 5-liter bottle of vodka for me and everyone there, and everyone will need it for different reasons. That's my dish.
Heard. Levi, what are you bringing to the Christmas party?
I'm very torn between like poppers, just because I think it'd be funny, and like some kind of 1950s like aspic jellied thing, because they can have that and I'll just leave.
Sounds about right. Christopher Wiggins, you are geographically the closest. What would you have brought to that Christmas party?
You are so on my level because I don't know what it's called, but it is this kind of Jell-O kind of whatever, like bundt cake formed thing that they make in the Midwest, according to a video that I saw this morning on Facebook. But I would also say maybe revenge, because it's best served cold.
There it is. I think you guys are talking about ambrosia salad kind of thing going on there. As I am living here in the Midwest, I'm learning that Jell-O can be put in everything. But I do want to remind our listeners the correct answer was deviled eggs. It was deviled eggs. Well, we certainly want to hear what you all are working on. Levi, what's coming up for you?
Too many things, but some stories. I'm working on some stories around the experiences of trans folks in ICE detention right now, because those are voices that we really never hear from. And beyond that, just getting ready for January's Supreme Court cases, which there's 2 involving the legality of bans on transgender athletes. So look out for that sometime in the next month or so.
Amazing. Spencer Macnaughton, what's coming up at Uncloseted Media?
Yes, we have a really, really nice story tomorrow. It's not a nice story, but it's a very well done story, but how queer South Asian women are navigating racism in queer spaces, and also homophobia often at home, and that it can often be kind of put them in double jeopardy in certain ways, depending on the spaces they're actually done. And there's some good solution-oriented things at the end of that article where, we can create a better place for this group of people. So our reporter, Nandika, did that. She did a fantastic job.
Amazing. And the prolific Christopher Wiggins, what do you got coming up?
I, too, am going to be at the Supreme Court. So that's kind of on the long term. But for this week on advocate.com, we're going to have a story out of Tennessee where I discovered this library situation where a board,
Yes.
there's a member on the board who decided to demand from the new library director the data on who was checking out what books in the library system in an effort to comply with the Tennessee Secretary of State's new order in compliance with President Trump's gender order that certain books need to be removed from the libraries.
And I will tell you in advance, Christopher, we will be talking about you behind your back because in a couple weeks we have Darian Aaron from GLAAD on the show, and he knows a lot about that story as well. So I'm excited to talk about your reporting and about that story. But for this week, that's all the time that we have. So I want to thank our amazing roundtable, Levi Kalish. What a pleasure to have you back. Please keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for bringing me back. I'm always welcome to come back.
Yes. Spencer Macnaughton, keep New York City warm for me, please.
Do my best. Thank you, Ken.
And Christopher Wiggins, a triumphant first appearance on the podcast. Thank you so much for all you are doing.
I'm so glad I passed the test.
I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. Those ratings, those reviews, they really do make a difference. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming like this. And we still have a couple more weeks of Newsmatch where all donations are matched. And that makes a huge difference as well to a scrappy queer nonprofit like us. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.